Hello and welcome to the Vedic Conversation, where each episode we take a different topic and look at it through the lens of storytelling and from the perspective of the Veda, an ancient but very much still relevant body of knowledge from India. I'm Rory Kinsella, a Vedic meditation teacher based in Sydney, and I'm joined by my Vedic colleagues Derrick Yanford in New York and Anthony Thompson in London. This episode was recorded in July and we're talking about adaptability. We look at how we can help ourselves stay relevant in an ever-changing world. But first, sit back and listen to our stories and then we'll dive into the conversation. And as always, don't forget to stick around until the end, where we'll offer a practical exercise in how you can apply this knowledge in your daily life. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and rate and review us.
Now, the Vedas tell us that nature is constantly evolving, moving from a state of less sophistication into one of greater sophistication, and that this is always at play. It's always happening. And I'm sure we can all agree, we have heard the term, the only thing constant is change. Absolutely, this is what nature is doing at all times. So why is it important for us to adapt? Well, those who are able to adapt to the changes in their environment, to expectations, to demands, lead a very different type of life than those who are rigidly attached. And I'll give an example of myself. So this COVID-19 pandemic is disrupting much of the way the globe is behaving. And I would imagine most of us did not expect to be in this situation. Now, to add to that, I was recently released from a position as an artistic director for a dance company that I love and I've worked for about the past 2 years. And although I knew the potentiality of it happening was real, when it actually did happen, I was a little bit shocked and surprised. But after 24 hours, I've let go. I've been able to see how it's actually kind of opened up some space in my life and allowing me to go down some different paths. And this is a very different reaction than the one I would have had a few years before I started meditating. I definitely had similar changes in demand, changes in expectation where, especially being in the arts, I was much more dramatic about it. But thankfully, through my meditation practice, I've been able to gain quite a bit of adaptation energy. And this is because when we sit and close our eyes, picking up the mantra and settling our mind and our body, we experience a very deep, dynamic state of rest. And in this rest, stress gets pushed from our physiology. And doing this over and over, during that restful period, we gain adaptation energy, right? And so we think of it as the ability to adapt to change, having a bank balance. You only have a finite amount of energy for which you can handle the changes in your environment or the changes in demand. Now, if you have a very low bank balance and you're living a very stressful life, when that balance is depleted, you may be flipped into a reactive fight or flight response right away. Right? We don't have that ability to step back for a little bit, reassess and decide what's the most relevant action to take because we're out of adaptation energy. But through the course of meditation, we keep filling and building this bank balance of energy, giving us the ability to adapt when changes happen. So it's not that we are superhuman beings. It's just that we have a further, deeper, larger capacity when it comes to changes happening in our environment that keep us from reacting in an irrelevant manner, flying off the handle, getting upset, interacting with somebody in a way that maybe later on we look back and think, I could have handled that a little bit better, but I was just so stressed out. Having the ability to adapt to change is paramount, and especially during this pandemic, as it's hard to say when things will go back to normal. But if we remember that the only thing constant is change, and that this largely may be exactly the kind of change we need to move forward, to grow, to become more sophisticated, then it's a little bit easier to handle.
As a teenager, I loved sailing small boats, trying to go as fast as possible whenever I could. When I was hanging out of a speeding boat, holding the tiller in one hand and the main sheet in the other, I was right on the edge, really enjoying myself, but I was always having to make adjustments and adapt so I didn't capsize. One day, a friend and I decided to take out a particularly fast boat in what anybody would consider strong conditions. We were experienced, but on this occasion we had met our match. For about an hour we were trying to head home, but had to land on a beach on the far side of the bay, dejected, scared, and exhausted. We weren't sure how we were going to get the boat back, but suddenly a guy approached us and offered to sail us back if we were prepared to act as crew, and more importantly, ballast. After a nerve-wracking 20 minutes, we hit shore, very grateful for the man's assistance and deeply humbled by the experience. Today, many of us are also feeling that we're living on the edge and about to tip over, but there don't appear to be any safe beaches or people to save us. It's all down to us. For many people, that's a very scary proposition, but I firmly believe everybody has the inner resources to deal with this current crisis. It's all about being adaptable. We have to loosen up and let go. We cannot hold on to the past, expecting it to be available when this is all over. And we can no longer micromanage our lives, expecting to determine the outcome. Nature has other plans. We need to adjust our attitude and put in place some discipline so that there is proper balance in our life. When that's in place, we'll have a structure which will allow for growth. And now is an ideal time to nourish ourselves, invest in ourselves, and move forward. In years to come, we want to look back at this moment with pride, knowing that we took advantage of the prevailing conditions, that we were prepared to be adaptable, and that we harnessed our power, energy, and awareness to ride the winds of change.
Back when I was finishing high school in my hometown of Bristol in the UK, I really wanted to study English literature at university. And I'd been a real late bloomer when it came to reading, but by 18 I had a really big love for books and put in applications to 6 universities as I was keen to get started as soon as I could. But my last year of school was a really tough one for many different reasons, and about halfway through the year my mum died suddenly after an accident and everything got turned upside down. I was all over the shop trying to deal with this tragic situation, but still wanted to keep going with my studies. Mum was very academic and successful herself, and she studied at Oxford and worked as an academic editor for Cambridge University. And I guess I wanted to follow in her footsteps by studying English like she had. And then at a certain point in the year, people started receiving offers from universities, which were usually contingent on them getting a certain grade in the final exam. And one day I received my first letter in the post and I got really excited opening it. It was like I knew that it was going to have this really big impact on my future. And it was a rejection. And this was a real shock, as I'd never really failed at anything, and I thought I'd put together a really strong application. I was predicted really good grades, but there it was in black and white, a rejection. But it was from one of the unis that I didn't really want to go to anyway, so I didn't mind too much. But then the letters kept coming, a few days apart or a few weeks apart, but relentlessly, one after the next. And so I got a rejection from UCL, a rejection from Sussex, a rejection from Nottingham, and it got to the point where there was only one university left, the one that I'd considered my safety net, the one that I knew I could easily get into based on my predicted grades, but I got rejected again. And I must have done something stupid like having a spelling mistake on my form. And from there, my options were then very limited. I could either wait for my results and go into clearing for a place at one of the less prestigious unis, or wait another year and then apply again. And I really didn't want to wait a following year as that wasn't my original plan. But I decided to take a year out and apply the following year anyway. And in the end, I was very glad that I did. It meant that when I did get to uni, I was a year older and more mature, although still not in any way mature as you can imagine. And I was better able to make the most out of the experience. I also gained some priceless life experience in the real world in my year off. I had my first proper job working full-time in a restaurant, and then I got to travel all around Europe with a friend and spend more than 2 months partying and having a whale of a time in Spain. And the Vedic lesson here is that we can rarely see the bigger picture when events are happening. We create plans and we try to rigidly stick to them, but the universe often has other plans. And what we learn through meditation is how to be adaptable. Every time we meditate, we flex our adaptability muscles and we find ourselves lost in thought, and rather than getting frustrated that we couldn't clear our minds, we accept that thinking is a fundamental part of the stress release process, even if that's not the type of meditation that we wanted. The world will throw up barriers and push us off our path every step of the way, but if we stay open and adaptable, we'll realize that the roads we end up on will be much more interesting than the ones we would have chosen.
So, Anthony, I loved that image of you on the sailing trip. Like, I'm not a good sailor, so as soon as you said boat, I was like, oh. I was like, as soon as you said boat, I was like, oh, I don't like the sound of this.
Yeah, it was pretty hairy, actually. It was, I think we all experience in life one or two moments which we look back on and think, not quite sure how I got out of that one, but I did. And if that guy hadn't turned up, and I knew he was a good sailor because I'd seen him sailing, and he'd been watching us from the shore, and I think just kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. And when we landed, we were exhausted, and he just kind of ambled up and said, I can sail you back if you're prepared to act as crew and ballast. And I mean, there was really no other way of getting back. We couldn't abandon the boat. And so we just had to ride it out again. And it was, but again, it was, when thinking about adaptability, it wasn't only adapting to the changing environmental scene as we were sailing, it was also adapting to the idea that we actually had to relinquish control of the situation to a stranger who actually was then going to deliver us back to where we really wanted to be. And, if we'd been very proud and arrogant, we would have said, no, we're fine, we'll sort this out. But I think we were too scared at that point to refuse any help,
Yeah,
there's a line, just being flexible.
There's a line where you say you were humbled, but I guess it was like you learned that being humble was the kind of right course of action there.
Yeah, because I think particularly with sailing, and I know Rory, you like surfing. You have to respect the sea. You have to respect the ocean, because if you don't, it will always come back and it'll bite you. And it was just that very visceral realization that nature could at any moment just tip it in the other direction.
And that's always made me more cautious about sailing, making sure that I got all the right safety kit and telling people where I'm going and what time I should be back, and if I'm not, then start looking out for me, all that sort of stuff. But you may have had a few hairy moments surfing, I suspect.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a surfer, but living by the beach, I've had quite a few goes. But like you say, it's a really good reminder that there are forces in the world that you don't control, and they regularly tell you that by flipping you over and making you, swallow a couple of gallons of seawater. And yeah, it's a humbling experience, but I guess it's good for us to have these humbling experiences. And I guess all of our stories talked about things that humbled us in some way. And it's this kind of relentless readjusting of expectations, which allows us to see the world as it actually is, rather than our kind of idea of what the world should be like. And maybe all of life is this process of readjusting our expectations to reality. And it was the same with my story, because I guess I was, a teenager at the time, and my first, outside of school, this was applying for university. That was like the first big thing of, I live in this small town, and I could go and live in this other town and join this, prestigious university. And then getting all those rejections was just like, what? I'm not used to this. And I kind of felt that I didn't deserve it, because I was getting all the right grades and I was doing all the right things, and to get it anyway, which I guess is the lesson is it doesn't matter how good your intentions are, and even how much work you put in, sometimes things will go wrong. And I never even found out what went wrong, but it must have been something stupid, like a spelling mistake. Maybe I spelt my name wrong or something. So I was applying to do English, so you can't have any spelling mistakes. But it teaches you a lesson, and there are other things available. So for me, it was, an enforced year out. And if anyone said to you now, would you like a year where you don't have to do anything? You can go and travel where you want. You can, have a job that doesn't have any responsibilities. You go, of course. You jump at the chance of that. But for some reason at the time, I was like, no, I just want to go to university and get started. So it's kind of when fate or the universe forces your hand into something which turns out to be way, way better than, you could have planned on your own. And there's this kind of greater power at work, or kind of storylines and narratives that you're not aware of, where, I think Derrick, in your story, you touched on how we have this adaptation energy that we get with meditation, which it's not that we don't react. I think in yours, you said that, you didn't like the fact that you lost your job, but it's that over time and with meditation, you've learned to bounce back quicker. So it's not like we don't come across these issues. It's just that we're better at bouncing back. So you're not holding on to something that happened years ago. Oh, I can't believe I lost that job. I can't believe it. You go, okay, I'm not happy that I lost that job, but I can kind of look for the new opportunities now.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all heard the phrase adapt or die, and I feel like there is a lot of truth in that if you don't have the ability to adapt, then maybe you're not going to make it, you're not going to survive, you're not going to continue to evolve. But I think what's different with meditation is that phrase for me has become just simply adapt. There's no fear of, if I don't adapt, this will happen. It's always, when you are in this situation where things are not the way you thought they were going to be, simply adapt. What does it mean? What do you have to do right now? It's not going the way that you want. Adapt. And because, we're meditators and we're given that adaptation energy, we get a bank balance full of it. well, then your ability to do it becomes easier and much more graceful. I can definitely think of, or try to think of what it would have been like had that situation arose and I wasn't meditating, and that's the metric by which I can go, okay, I have the ability to adapt in a much more graceful manner and see, this is exactly what life does to all of us over and over and over again. And as we get some skill and we kind of think we know what the future is going to hold, we always are discovering it's changing constantly. And I mean, I've never been sailing, but I feel, or surfing for that matter. But I feel like those two examples, those are very visceral because it's so much in the moment. It's happening so much right now. I mean, the closest for me physically, like today I went for a bike ride and I tried to ride the bike for as long as I could without using my hands or, and I came to a cul-de-sac at one point and I was like, am I going to be able to do this? And it's just those little shifts in weight and adapting each and every time that I was like, of course I can do this. And it happened rather smoothly. And I think you just have to remember when it comes to our life, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. We're always making these tiny little adjustments. And I'm actually grateful in the sense of what we're going through now, coming out of lockdown and whatnot, that I feel like I'm thriving too. We've done a lot of changing, each of us, and a lot of adapting. And I mean, I definitely credit that to our meditation practice, that we are not only adapting, but that we're thriving in these moments.
I like your analogy of holding onto the bicycle because, I think so many people find themselves in difficulty when they hold on too tight to the thing that's going wrong because they're frightened of an alternative. They can't see, or they've never experienced that. Actually, by letting go, other opportunities, as you so cleverly put in your piece, present themselves. New paths open up, new opportunities open up. And it requires a little bit of courage. But, if you keep holding on, whatever it is that's being destroyed is going to pull you down. And, with your reference to the lockdown, people who have allowed the whole situation to get on top of them have been crushed by it. And, maybe they haven't had the skills, maybe they haven't had a technique like Vedic meditation to help them rise above that and see that actually it's like staying on the sinking ship. Don't stay on the sinking ship because that's going to end badly. You want to throw yourself off and see which way the currents and the wind are going to blow you. And then, who knows, you might come across a beautiful island, you might come across land, you might find a boat. All sorts of things can happen, but you won't know until you let go. But if you carry on holding on, it could end a disaster. And I mean, when you were talking about being asked to leave your job, it reminded me of when I was asked to leave my job. And I'm thinking in particular of some colleagues of mine who have never got over the fact that they were made redundant. They never moved on. And, it's the biggest wrong in their life. They've been wronged and they've never been able to get over it. And, it's such a shame when you see somebody who had all that potential and all that opportunity to move forward and explore new things, just allowing themselves to be crushed and burdened by an event.
Yeah, a couple of points out of that. The bike, I love the idea of the balance on the bike. I think it's such a perfect metaphor for life. It's not like we're set and then that's it, set and forget. You have to keep managing the balance. And I had a really good kind of similar example of that when I learned to ride a motorbike a couple of years ago. and I'd be all fine with it, except there's the big road near here, which is when it gets quite windy, you'd be blown around a bit, and I'd be like, I'm going like 80 kilometers an hour, and I'd be feeling like, oh, this is unstable. So the kind of my natural reaction was to hold on tighter, to hold on to the handlebars tighter, to kind of, make sure I didn't fall off. But I was like, I need to look this up because that didn't seem right. And I kind of Googled it, and it's the actual response that you need to do is to hold on with your legs. So hold on to the tank with your legs, but loosen up your hands. So literally go loose at your hands, because the bike has a certain amount of centrifugal force where it will go in a straight line if there's no one on it, because it can rebalance itself. But you'll fall off because you'll make it go. So you have to loosen your grip and just make sure you're on it, but you're not controlling the micro directions. Like the wind, it will blow it, and it will go the other direction. Like you wouldn't think to do that. And it's such a non-intuitive thing when stuff is going wrong to go, I'm going to loosen my grip here, not tighten it, which is one of those kind of counterintuitive things that we learn in meditation, is not to hold on and not to try to meditate, but to kind of fall into it. And the other point, Anthony, was about there's this, the Vedic kind of analogy to different types of consciousness. So the way this is told is that, so you can have, say, a chisel, and you take a rock, and you can write a word in that rock. I can't remember what it is in the example, but let's say anger, so anger over losing a job, say. So you can write anger in that stone with a chisel, and that word will stay there for possibly thousands of years. Like a space age archaeologist will find it, and they'll see that anger there. You can take that same chisel and draw in the sand, and you can write anger, and that anger will be there for maybe a couple of hours, maybe a couple of days, depending on whether it's windy or not. Then you can take that same chisel and write that word in the water, anger, and it will be gone in a second. And that's how we can look at different states of consciousness. It's not that they don't experience those emotions, but the kind of lower state of consciousness, it will be there forever. It won't ever get over that anger. It will just hold on to it. When we expand consciousness, it's more like the sand, and it will be there for a bit longer, but it will still go. But then the high state of consciousness, that's like the water, where it feels it more deeply. Like the chisel goes way deeper than into the stone, but it's gone. Experiences it in the moment, but then move on. So it's, that idea of water is the most adaptable thing. It will go anywhere. It will, whatever the container is, it will fill that container immediately. And it's a really nice kind of an analogy to think of, how can we be in flow? How can we, we talk about being in flow, and what is in flow? Water is in flow. So it's a really nice way of thinking about it.
Derrick, when you're dancing or choreographing dance, flow is obviously an extremely important part of that. And you as a choreographer, as a creative person, must always be adapting to the environment, to the performers, to the music, and it's not a constant, because every performance is going to be different. You may have a soundtrack, a taped soundtrack, but the performers are, interacting slightly differently. And so there's that constant adaptation that's going on when you're on stage, I would imagine.
Well, on stage and even in the studio rehearsing. And so it's interesting because I was just speaking to a mentor of mine about this, and I had two who operated very differently. I had one who we would like to plan and plot out everything before and then teach the dancers. And then I had one who maybe it was a loose plan, but we would go in and we would create on them. And both had their, they were effective in certain ways. But the one where it was like, okay, have a loose plan, his whole theory was we could make a big, huge, great plan, but if the dancers can't carry it out, we're just going to change it anyway. We're going to always have to keep changing it to what they can do. because giving them work that doesn't work for them is futile. And there's a choreographer, he's American, but he was the director of a company in Germany for years. And his name is William Forsythe. And one of the things that he would love to do with his company is he would create an entire ballet to a certain piece of music. And then he would be known for, at curtain or 30 minutes before curtain, he would change the entire score to something that dancers had not heard before. And yet they're going to do the same movement. But of course, it can't be the same movement because the music is influencing what they're doing. You know, it vibrates very differently. And so I've played with this as well with some of my dancers in rehearsals. And, you know, that's the beauty of great artistry, is that they can adapt and change. And even, you know, what I love about live theater is a lot of things can go wrong. The music can stop, the wrong track is being played, you're in the wrong place, whatever, you're saying the wrong line, whatever it is. And it's really amazing to watch artists kind of adapt to the new environment, what's going on now, and see how they kind of figure their way out of that. And if it's done really well and nobody really can tell, that's when it's kind of clutch. But Rory, I was thinking too, you know, with your story, I kind of felt like had that been me, I would have been devastated. You know what I mean? And I feel like you found a way to embrace it and not let yourself be crushed by it, you know, and that change of expectation and your ability to adapt. So I'm just wondering too, like, you know, that I think I don't feel devastation the way that I used to before meditation, because I definitely, you know, when you get your hopes up and you think, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be going to this university, and everybody says no, like, wow.
Yeah, and you know, this would have been however many decades ago, so I may be just glossing over my devastation at the time. You know, it's one of those ones where you know you can't do anything about it, and I think what was good about it for me was that the alternative was actually really good, and the alternative was something that lots of people chose to do anyway. So I think with that one, it was really easy because it wasn't. All it was really was a delay of a year, with the other option being so clearly something desirable, because it's, you know, you don't have to. Well, you know, you have to work, but you can just do whatever you want. You know, it was what I loved. It was this first chance for me to do like a non-professional job. Like I was a waiter in a bar, which I wouldn't have had a chance to do. And all these life experiences you get having like a kind of normal job. And, you know, even things like that, it just changes my appreciation of people who work in those hospitality industries. And it means that I'm always much more polite to waiting staff than, you know, maybe you naturally would think to be. But I think with that example, it was probably easier because, yeah, like I say, the other option was so good, which is like, you know, go and travel Europe with your friends and go and get drunk in Ibiza for 2 months. It was like, okay, fine. But there's
tough choice.
Well, yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's this other idea that I was thinking about the other day. So in NLP, they have this idea where the person with the most flexibility has the most control in any kind of group or situation, because they're the one with the most choices and they can kind of manage the compromises and move the kind of agenda. Whereas if you're one of the people on the poles, you're like, nope, not doing anything, not changing anything. So you don't really get to well, this is the idea, you don't have enough. With no flexibility, you can't move around, you can't make deals, you can't make compromises. So being more flexible allows us to exert more control. I guess you could see yourself as like the power broker who's like, you know, I'll compromise here and I'll compromise here, but which means you get to a result rather than just like, nope, not doing it, not moving. You're like much more like the stroppy child who's, you know, refusing to to go where, you know, the parents want. But I guess, you know, so yeah, Anthony, you talked about the idea of not micromanaging everything, and I guess Anthony, you touched on it as well. I guess there's an idea where we have intentions, but we're less stuck on the detail, which, you know, because no one can plan out the whole detail of the universe.
Yeah, I think, you know, Derrick, you touched on this about, you know, being on stage and things going wrong. It's being in the present moment, you know, paying attention. And I see this a lot over the last couple of months, you know, during lockdown, that people's attention span has changed, that they don't have the capacity to concentrate for long periods of time, that there's been this kind of a change in their sense of focus. And, you know, when we pay attention, we see the opportunities. And when we pay attention and we're adaptable, then we can, as you were saying, Rory, you can go in any direction. And you can go in the opposite direction to the one that you thought was going to be the path that you were going to be taking. Because, as we've touched on, or will touch on in other things, you know, you're following the charm. You're seeing that actually what looked good isn't so great, that something over here is much better. And yeah, I can imagine on stage, you know, if you're not concentrating, if you're not paying attention, you're going to find yourself in a bit of a mess. And then everybody else has to adapt around you to kind of accommodate your rigidity.
You know, for me, I was the type of performer who I wasn't in love with it like a lot of my friends and my colleagues were. They loved to get on stage. That's where they felt the most alive. For me, it was a little bit different. I loved being in rehearsal because I felt safe, and I liked problem solving, and I liked the creation. And I also would overthink performing. And so it's not lost on me that I would forget choreography from time to time when I was on stage, whether it was a solo or I was with a group of people. And it was just a common thing for me. My brain would just, you know, I'd have a brain fart. But what I learned in those moments is what becomes more important is what is the most important thing. And it's not necessarily the movement, the step itself, it's what the movement's trying to express. And so as a soloist, it's much easier to forget the choreography and then go, okay, what do I do? Well, I stay in this moment. You're going to continue whatever the truth of this piece is, as long as your movement kind of is in line with that, then you're okay, because the audience isn't really going to know. You know, and I think the same is true in life. You have a plan about what it is you want to do. You come up against some unexpected things. So how do you adapt to that? Well, you figure out really quickly, what's the most important thing really for me to be doing? And then you continue in that vein, you know? And so it's very, even thinking about it right now, I'm just like, I can tell you, there was one time I had a group of friends come and watch me for a performance in New York for a festival called APAP, where a lot of companies go and do little snippets of their work to get booking throughout the year. And it was a piece where the men wear these long skirts. And there's a couple red ones, there's a couple orange ones, and I had a purple skirt on and I was in the center. And I kind of noticed that my friends were there at one point, and I think I ended up reversing the choreography. Instead of doing it on the right side, I was doing all the steps, but on the left side, which is weird for me. And then afterwards, they were like, half of them were like, yeah, so that one part, were you supposed to do that choreography like this? And they had this whole debate, because half of them were like, yeah, of course, you see he was in the center and he had the purple skirt, so he was supposed to, you know? And I was just like, okay, it worked. I don't know It really probably should have been on the other side, but I just what's most important is doing what the quality of the work is. And I think I've let that kind of parlay itself into my life, because there's plenty of things, trips or, just, how you're going to spend your day that get uprooted because you can't do that thing anymore. You can't go this direction anymore. There's a detour. Are you going to have a hissy fit? You could. Is that going to change? Is the road going to magically appear now and open up for you? Not so much. What's the most important thing? I want to get to that destination. So here's another route. Just change the route and go that way. And even if you maybe don't get there, then again, you can adapt and say, oh, the way of getting here, that had so much to offer me as well, and but I think it's great that meditation also allows us the ability to kind of step back and go, okay, what can I do here? How can I adapt without that rigidity of it? It's got to be, and I feel very fortunate for that.
Yeah. And there's often, in live performance, places where the mistakes are actually some of the best bits. Like I remember there was the MTV Unplugged thing in the 90s where Nirvana played, and they're covering the man who changed the world. I can't remember the exact title of the song, David Bowie song. And Kurt Cobain does this clanging bad note in the guitar solo. But whenever I hear anyone, listen to that song with other people, everyone points out the duff note in the guitar solo, because it's like, that's the best bit. Because it's like, it shows, he was this kind of messy character, and it shows him in that element of, getting stuff wrong. And he was very human and very kind of troubled, and that kind of showed it in that live performance that you wouldn't get in the studio recording because they just redo it. But kind of the mistakes kind of add to the beauty of life. But also, I think it's important for us to recognize that being adaptable isn't about being flaky or being weak. It's actually a sign of great strength. And, it makes me think of yoga, where, it's about becoming more flexible, and so you can bend and do all the moves, and that's how you find strength. So there's an idea that by bending and moving and adapting, it's not that we're weak, it's the opposite. That's how we find our strength, and that's how we show our strength. It's not in these minor things of, I'm going to stick to this or I'm going to stick to that. It's, my strength is bigger than this one particular thing, so I don't need this one particular thing. I have this bigger aspect to me. And, in meditation, we would say that we're connecting with our bigger self, or connecting with the wider conscious field around us. But it's important that in the moment when we're, or even in public speaking, they talk about open with a story that shows you're vulnerable, because people connect with that. So always giving a kind of veneer of strength is not good. It doesn't help you connect with people.
Mm-hmm.
Your flexible analogy, reminds me of some things that I sometimes see out of my flat window. I live on top of a hill, and I'm surrounded by trees, very fortunately. And when the wind comes in from the west, you see these big trees swaying. They are flexible. They are adapting to the climate, to the environmental pressure, if you like. But the reason they don't snap and break is because they've got these amazing roots, this great big root system that spreads out in every direction. Sometimes the roots are as long as the tree is tall. And so at the bottom of the trunk, there's hardly any movement at all. But at the top of the tree, it's swaying in every direction. And it can just accommodate what's being thrown at it. But as with your yoga analogy, there is that strength and suppleness, but the strength comes about because there are deep foundations which are put in place. And that's what our meditation is doing, is that every day we're just laying down more foundations for that strength, the adaptability, and the consistency, if you like. It's a a fascinating combination of things that comes about. It's the certainty and the uncertainty. It's the adaptability and the ability to stay true to a particular path, to pursue the objective, as you were saying, Derrick.
Yeah, which is back to that idea of balance. It's all balance, and the thing about balance is it's not set. Like I said, it's not set and forget. You're constantly having to do it, and I guess it's not putting yourself in a position where you don't mind doing those little adjustments, because you've, like Derrick, you said, you've come into a cul-de-sac. What are you going to do? You have to adapt, and it's about the quicker you can adapt, the better things are going to be, because you're going to be the one who, there's an earthquake and you stand up faster and you're able to react faster, because you're not going, whoa, what the hell was that? The person who's on their feet quickest is going to be able to react, whether that's helping other people or whatever it is. The person who is able to recover quickest is in the best position to make the next move.
I feel like in terms of other artists or whatnot, like if you think of like Cher or Madonna, Cher had a career that started in the 60s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s to aughts, and the teens. It's like, this is a person who has found a way to adapt to the ever-changing needs of her audience and listeners. Madonna, the same thing. Like, these are women who are constantly reinventing themselves. When you look at that, you're like, they could have, like some other people or artists, decide, okay, this is who I am, this is how it's going to be, and that's it. And make no qualms about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. But also recognizing, okay, can I now, the music sounds like this a little bit more, it's a little bit more popular, people are moving in this direction. Can I also follow that? And even with Prince, from what I understand, he, I would think we all agree he's a musical genius. But there came a point where rap became very popular. And he was like, should I start rapping? Should I start incorporating? And after a lot of thought, he figured out he was going to make his stuff a little bit more rhythmic, like rap, not rap necessarily, but he knew that, okay, I have a certain sound, but the sound is changing. I have to adapt to that as well. And so when you see, people who've had a career that spans over, generations like that, these are people who've really figured it out, and so I try to draw my inspiration, from these people at times, especially when it's like, when you get good at something and you kind of feel like, I figured it out. Now everybody's asking you to change that, do this. You're like, you have to decide sometimes, is that what I want to do? But I think what I've discovered is when I choose to adapt and change, that's when I discover the most about myself. One, how flexible I really can be, and then uncovering all these things about myself that I didn't know. And that that's what the situation largely was asking of me. Who are you now? Who can you be now? This thing has changed now. What are you now because of it? And then that makes it less scary. I find I can put myself in situations where there's more risk, in the sense of, I don't know what's going to be asked of me, but I know enough about what I've done in the past that, yeah, it's constantly changing. I'm just going to have to reinvent myself, maybe sooner than I would like to, but so be it. And so then it becomes this welcoming. You start to welcome change, and you start to go, what's next? How can this becomes really, really interesting. And I feel like that's the other way meditation too takes the life that we're leading and colors it and makes it much more interesting. as opposed to the idea of, oh my God, it's not, we're largely trying to figure out what we're going to do in the future from what we did unfavorably in the past. And meditation puts us more in the present moment and goes, what's here? What's going on right now? And that becomes a very delightful experience.
Okay, thank you for watching till the end. Each episode we offer a takeaway, a practical exercise you can do at home to apply this knowledge to your own life. In this episode we were talking about adaptability and how it helps us stay relevant in an ever-changing world. This week your challenge is to practice adaptability in some very practical physical ways. We'd like you to try making some simple everyday changes to help open you up to being more adaptable. So for a day this week, if you're right-handed, try being left-handed or vice versa. Or see what it's like to switch hands for your knife and fork while eating. Or try brushing your teeth with the other hand. Or if your partner is open to it, try switching sides of the bed for a night. And if you're happy to share your stories, we'd love to hear them and for you to join the conversation. Send them to us at stories@thevediconversation.com or post them on social media with the hashtag #TheVedicConversation. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and we'll see you next time.